Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me so much pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of India Habitat Center and Professor Benoy K Behl. Today's talk is the 20th in his monthly series, Glimpses of Culture. How does one speak of an art historian who is a respected speaker at a breathtakingly long list of prestigious universities and museums around the world? Yet art history is only one part of his life's mission. He is a filmmaker who has made over 146 deeply researched documentary films. He is an eminent photographer, Buddhist scholar, and a record setting traveler. He is the author of some of the best selling books on Indian art history in the world. As a labor of love, Professor Behl has traveled to all corners of this vast subcontinent, documenting even remote temples and sites, not just once, but several times. The result is a breathtaking documentation of culture, which provides a new perspective to Indian and Asian art and culture. Professor Behl has repeatedly traveled and documented numerous Hindu and Buddhist sites in the Valley of Kashmir. These include ancient sites which have been scarcely visited by any other art historian in the last 40 years. His coverage provides a fresh vision of the ancient culture of Kashmir. Ladies and gentlemen, Benoy K Behl speaks to us today on the ancient legacy of Kashmir. Over to Mr. Behl now. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sujata. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A great pleasure to be here with you again. My many thanks to the India Habitat Center for this yet another opportunity to share a chapter of the beautiful art heritage of this subcontinent and this continent. It's such a pleasure. My thanks are deeply owed to Doordarshan for having sponsored today's film. As a matter of fact, it has been most remarkable that a television broadcasting organization has patronized the making of so many films of mine over the last 25 years on serious subjects of art history in this commercialized world of today. This is most unusual and so much in keeping with Doordarshan's role as a public broadcaster. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1998, I began my journeys to document the ancient culture in Kashmir. As has happened with everybody who visits that beautiful valley, I was also struck by the beauty of the place. It is so fertile, so full of flowers, so beautiful. It is the first thing that strikes you and wins you over completely in that valley. As a matter of fact, it becomes so obvious that being amid so much of the wonder of nature, one is never very far from catching a glimpse of the truth which is beyond all that we see. And yes, indeed, it is this valley which saw the development of some of the finest flowers of the philosophy of India. Kashmir Shaivism is an exquisitely worked out philosophy. And in this philosophy, the ever-present, the all-encompassing reality, the great consciousness is Shiva. And nature around us is within Shiva, Shakti, the manifestation of himself in the world that we perceive around us. And amid all this is the individual who feels the pains of separation, who feels the pains of the lack of knowledge, who feels the pains of not recognizing the truth of the all-encompassing consciousness, which is Shiva. And it is this which has been beautifully expressed and in this philosophic path. In fact, in this veil, in this beautiful veil, one can just imagine great philosophers like Abhinav Gupta of the 10th century, sitting and thinking about how one's response to beauty is in fact akin to this ecstasy of salvation itself. For in that moment that we perceive beauty, that we perceive grace, the veils of illusion may be lifted and we are seeing the truth, we're seeing the grace which is beyond all that we see, which is behind all that we see, which is within all that we see. And so that is the individual hoping for knowledge through the ecstasy of recognizing the beauty of it all, the all-pervasive Nirgun Shiva, Shakti that is within him, that manifestation in the forms of the world, of all his magnificence, and the individual seeking to know it all. Now, such is the kind of philosophy which was born in this lovely valley. And as for Buddhism, the Valley of Kashmir has been one of the greatest of Buddhist centers. When Xuanzang came here, he wrote much about it. And the capital of Lalitaditya, King Lalitaditya, Parihaspura, would have served as the stupas and chaityas here, would have served as the models of the later Central Asian and Chinese stupas which came up. And the Mahayana, the less austere form of Buddhism, developed to great heights out here. So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you into the beautiful Valley of Kashmir. Sushant, I would request you to please show the film. Thank you very much.
Over the past 31 years, I've had the joy of traveling repeatedly to many corners of this vast subcontinent that is India. It is amazing to see how landscapes, culture, food, music, dances, and even languages change every few hundred kilometers that you drive. You see the highest mountains of the world, great seas, bountiful rivers, and best of all, a people whose thoughts and heritage go back a few thousand years. Join us on an enthralling journey. I am traveling again across the whole of India to bring you spectacular India. In the heart of the great Himalayas is a verdant valley which has been described by poets and emperors as paradise. Over the centuries, this beautiful vale has seen the blossoming of many of the most beautiful flowers of the philosophy of man. Kashmir has always been a renowned center of Hindu and Buddhist philosophy. In ancient times, it was known as Sharada Peeth, or the seat of the deity of learning. It was here that the Indian philosophy of aesthetics was developed in great detail by the philosopher Abhinav Gupta in the 10th century. It is in Kashmir that Shaivism rose to its fullest heights. The manifestation of Shiva in the beauty of the world around us was worshipped as Shakti. With the Kushanas came the golden age of Buddhism in Kashmir. Hundreds of stupas and chaityas were built right across the valley. Most importantly, in the time of Emperor Kanishk in the 1st century AD, the 4th Great Buddhist Council was held at Harvan, here near Srinagar. Learned monks and scholars converged here from all over to discuss and to interpret sacred Buddhist texts. This was one of the greatest meetings of Buddhist intellectuals the world had ever seen.
From the 1st to the 12th centuries, the Valley of Kashmir was one of the most important centers of Buddhist learning. Here, Buddhist thought constantly interacted with Kashmir Shaivism. The Indian philosophy of aesthetics was also most highly developed in this beautiful valley. This philosophy believes that the moment in which we respond to something beautiful is similar to Brahmananda, the bliss of salvation itself. We are transformed by our appreciation of beauty. It helps to lift the veils of the illusions of the material world so that we can see the truth beyond.
In the 8th century, Kashmir was ruled by an enlightened and great king, Lalitaditya. According to the 12th century historian Kalana, King Lalitaditya expanded his kingdom and conquered most of northern India. These military adventures are more likely to have been successful raids rather than conquests. However, the king would have brought back inestimable treasures of precious stones and gold. The prosperity of that time is reflected in the wonderful monuments and art. King Lalitaditya made a large Vishnu temple and a Buddhist chaitya at Parihaspura. In the 8th century, this would have been one of the greatest religious centers of the world. Though in ruins now, the scale of the monuments speaks of their former glory. These would have been the models for stupas and temples all over Central Asia in the 8th century. A crowned Buddha found at Parihaspura displays the artistic style of that time. This glorious stupa was made by Chankuna, minister of King Lalitaditya. Such was the cosmopolitan culture of that period that while the king was making a Vishnu temple, his minister was making this Buddhist stupa. It is perhaps this stupa which is depicted in the 11th century paintings of Alchi in Ladakh. These paintings were made by Kashmiri artists who were invited for the purpose. In them we see the architecture and lifestyle of Kashmir at that time.
While the art of the Kashmir Valley from the 8th century to, let's say, the 13th century does not survive in Kashmir itself, we know about it through the art, paintings, sculptures, architecture that were made by artists from the valley in the trans-Himalayan desert lands such as Ladakh. These styles, of course, we know travel to Kinnaur and Spiti, paintings in western Tibet. And it's in these images that we get an idea of the lifestyles of Kashmir at that time. One of the most telling images, in fact, is found in a 3-story temple in the monastery of Alchi in Ladakh, where as part of a much larger sort of image on the wall. You see in a painting made on the clay dhoti of an 18-foot large image of Avalokiteshwar, which really represents one of the most lasting documents of Kashmiri culture. You see a little temple to Tara, the goddess Tara, who is recognized as one of the most important Vajrayana Buddhist deities of that time, made right next to, in fact as part of the same building complex, of a larger temple to Balaram of the Vaishnav cult.
The historian Kalhana writes about the colossal gold, silver and copper Buddha statues and Vishnu statues which were kept in these temples. These would have continued the tradition of Brahad or colossal Buddhas, which was first seen in the Kanheri caves of Western India. The tradition of Brahad Buddhas was also later seen in Ladakh, in Bamiyan, in China and in Japan. The temples of Kashmir have a remarkable architectural style of their own. These are quite unlike the styles of North and South India. Greek and Central Asian influences are seen in the triangular pediments enclosing a trefoil arch. A massive temple dedicated to Martand, the sun, was built by Lalitaditya at a commanding location above Anantnag. Except for the colossal 13th century sun temple at Konarak in Odisha, this is the largest temple made to the sun ever in India. It is also the largest Hindu temple in Kashmir. There is a small but well-preserved 8th or 9th century temple at Pandarethan on the outskirts of Srinagar. It is a Shiva temple. This figure of Indrani, the wife of Lord Indra, was found here. An earlier 7th century colossal head of Shiva was also found at Pandarethan. A number of terracotta heads have been found at stupa sites in Akhnur and Ushkur. These would be of the 5th or 6th century. It was the 9th century. King Avanti Varman, the founder of the Utpala dynasty, built two magnificent temples at Avantipura. One was dedicated to Shiva and the other to Vishnu. The Avanti Swami temple here, dedicated to Vishnu, was modelled on the lines of the Martand Sun temple, though this one is much smaller. Though the temple is in a ruined state, a few panels survive to the side of the steps leading up to the temple. These show the exuberance of the sculptural style of Kashmir in the 9th century. The most popular form of Vishnu in Kashmir was the four-headed Chaturmurti. To the sides of the central human face, we see the faces of his incarnations as a boar and a lion. The facial type and the modelling of the torso are typical of the style of Kashmiri art. Unlike earlier austere forms of Buddhism, the Mahayana and the Vajrayana schools flourished here. Earlier Buddhism was mainly an ethical message which called upon each person to seek his own salvation through self-discipline. The new form of Buddhism brought the concept of bodhisattvas. These were beings who had postponed their own salvation to help others in the world. They would lead other men and women to salvation. Followers could turn to them and pray for their help. The Mahayana form of Buddhism was filled with the beauty of life and of the beauty of nature seen everywhere in the valley. This marked the beginning of a great spread of the Buddhist faith northwards through the great Himalayan passes to the other countries of Asia.
In the 7th century, Xuanzang, the Chinese pilgrim traveller, visited Kashmir. He found that it was a flourishing centre of Buddhism which rivaled the importance of eastern India. The Chinese pilgrim found many stupas and thousands of monks here. By this time, in the 7th century, Buddhism had entered its third major phase, the Vajrayana school, or the vehicle of the thunderbolt. The logic of this school was supposed to be as striking as a thunderbolt and as indestructible as a diamond. The complex rituals, chants, and mudras or gestures of Vajrayana Buddhism were codified in the form of tantras. Tantra literally means to carry on knowledge. The formidable mountains that ring the valley did not prevent Kashmiri monks from traveling constantly to Tibet, Central Asia, and China. Between the 4th and 10th centuries, they took the teachings of Buddhism far and wide. Kumara Jiva was the son of Kumarayana from Kashmir. He is one of the greatest names in Chinese Buddhist history. Bronzes and manuscripts with paintings were also carried to distant lands by these teachers. This spread the aesthetics of Kashmiri art far and wide. The trans-Himalayan lands of Spiti, Kinnaur and Ladakh are a magical place. The tallest mountains of the world stand guard here. Ancient culture is preserved till today in this great crucible. In this land where everyday life is a challenge, Buddhism arrived very early. Emperor Kanishka made the Sani Stupa in Ladakh in the 1st century AD.
We are at Mulbek, 35 kilometers southeast of Kargil. This is on the ancient trade route which connected Kashmir to Leh in Ladakh. Along with the movement of goods, Buddhist culture and Kashmiri art travelled along this route. Behind me is a massive Maitreya Buddha statue over 20 feet tall. There are 3 such colossal statues in the Kargil district. These mark the movement of Kashmiri art and Buddhism into Ladakh. We see here the artistic style of Kashmir in the 8th and 9th centuries. We see also the close similarity of the iconography of the Shiva statues.
There are other such colossal Buddhas and rock carvings of the 7th to the 9th centuries along the trade routes. In 975 AD, King Yeshe O of Guge in Tibet sent Rinchen Zangpo to Kashmir. This arduous journey was made to bring back scriptures with the original and pure knowledge of the faith. The mission was also to bring back artists to build, paint, and sculpt new temples in Guge. Rinchen Zangpo spent 17 years in Kashmir, completing his own education and guiding his disciples. In the years to come, he became known as the revered Lhotsava, or Great Translator. His translations brought to Guge the true knowledge of Buddhism which the king had sought. In the 4th century, in the Buddhist centers of Kashmir, the Yogacharya school of thought had developed. It was believed that the most effective way to attain the truth was through meditation or yoga. The aim of yoga is to become one with the eternal. The different aspects of the wisdom of the Buddha were personified as the 5 Buddhas: Akshobhya, Ratnasambhava, Amitabha, Amogha Siddhi, and Vairochana. Vairocana, who symbolizes the wisdom of the Buddha's enlightenment, is the supreme Buddha in the Yoga Tantras. Rinchen Zangpo had studied scriptures related to mandalas of Vairocana during the time he spent in Kashmir. In this period, the second diffusion of Buddhism in the Trans-Himalayas, it was mainly temples devoted to Vairocana which were made. It is believed by the people of the Trans-Himalayan lands that Rinchen Zangpo made 108 monasteries and temples. He had brought 32 artists to Guge from the Valley of Kashmir. They were to create the foundations of a lasting tradition of Buddhist art. The painters and sculptors from Kashmir brought with them a highly sophisticated form of art. Inside these temples, one enters an enchanted space. It is a world of graceful forms and color. The purpose of this art is to take us into the deep and harmonious spaces of the inner self.
The paintings in the monastery of Alchi reveal a lot about the sort of ethos that would have existed in terms of not just the artistic styles but also the philosophy and religion of that time. One imagines that, when one goes into a Buddhist monastery, one will find religious paintings, paintings of deities. And actually when one goes in, one walks into a space that transforms oneself, that takes one away from the world. While there are mandalas with deities, the artist really seems to be coming into his own when depicting the world around the deities. So you have innumerable in fact, images of, for instance, apsaras that fly bearing garlands or trays with flowers around the deities. And when you see these little figures, twisting and turning through the air, performing almost acrobatic feats, you realize that it's a world which is completely imbued with a sense of the joy of discovery. And in this, one cannot but think of Abhinavgupta and the philosophy of aesthetics that he propounds, where he says that, in fact, an image has the power to give you a taste of the eternal. And in that moment, when you're looking upon images such as these little figures flying through the air, or even dancers that are made in these so-called religious paintings, you do tend to forget yourself. You tend to forget that you're standing in a monastery, you tend to forget the place that you're in, you tend to forget the time that you're in. And in that experiencing, even for a very, very brief moment of that eternal, you come close to what Abhinavgupta talked about. You come close to what he talks about as a taste of Brahmananda. While you may not experience it, this is a glimpse of that.
Amidst the natural beauty of the Kashmir Valley, the most joyous Hindu and Buddhist philosophy was born. This saw beauty as a stepping stone towards the final truth and salvation itself. This philosophy led to the creation of art which fills us with joy and transforms us. There is a lyrical grace in the work of the Kashmiri artist. The legacy of ancient Kashmir is continued till today in the lands of Ladakh and Himachal Pradesh.
Matilani yuli salanspol singe kaba lada yul gil salanspol al sanspol singe kaba sanspol singe kalaba Spangers geht bedursi Sanspåsing kalabar parsket bedursi.
Thank you, Sushant, for an excellent screening. My thanks to Sujata Chatterji, who is, in fact, so much responsible for making all my work happen. Now, the most beautiful thing, as we said in the film also, about the art of Kashmir is a sense of joy which it has. It's a unique art, it's a unique extent of joyousness which pervades everything. It is a joy of discovery, it is a joy of knowledge, much as in Kashmir Shaivism, it is the philosophy of knowledge, the attainment of the knowledge of that oneness of all that there is, an attainment of the knowledge of the beauty which pervades it all. And you see this so beautifully expressed in the art of the 108 monasteries which were spread across the Trans Himalayas. And since the paintings of Kashmir itself of the ancient period have not survived, it is these paintings in the Trans Himalayan monasteries which are the surviving visual record of this art. Now, the roads and routes in ancient times were a little different from the ones that we follow today. Therefore, some of the closest connections with the art of Kashmir are to be found in the temples of both the stone and the wooden temples of the Chamba area, because they are mountain paths that connected uh, the Kashmir Valley to Chamba. Also, we find in Lahore at Udaipur, there is a wooden temple which reflects again the art of Kashmir. So the art of Kashmir was well spread and influenced so much not only of the Trans Himalayas, but of Himachal Pradesh as well. Besides the fact that it spread very considerably to other parts of Asia. We spoke very briefly about Kumara Jiva, who was a son of the Kashmiri Kumarayana. Kumarayana was married to the princess of Kucha, whose name was Jiva. And Kumara Jiva's name is a combination of the name of Kumarayana and Princess Jiva. So it is Kumara Jiva. And Kumara Jiva is the most important name in Chinese Buddhism. And right across on the Silk Route, you see the influence of Kashmiri art on the surviving paintings. So it is a great spread of a joyous tradition which there was. And ladies and gentlemen, I would be happy to answer questions if you have any.
Yes. First question is from Godan Nambutripat. Where did they get all the wonderful colors? The material, are they minerals or from plants?
Godan, good to hear from you. And yes, the colors would be both mineral, largely mineral, and also vegetable. They would be the ones that were naturally available, and they would also be blues coming from lapis lazuli, which was found on this artery of the Silk Route.
Where can we see the sculptures we saw?
Most of the sculptures that you would have seen would be either in situ in the places that were mentioned. In fact, for instance, the one which was of King Yeshu is at the Goge Palace ruins in western Tibet. But the museum pieces are very largely from the Archaeological Museum at Srinagar. And of course, there are sculptural pieces from Kashmir, which are to be found in many museums in India and abroad also. Thank you. I might mention that the Riedberg Museum in Zurich has the only very good collection of later paintings of Kashmir. The miniature paintings, the best of them are in the Riedberg Museum of Zurich in Switzerland. Thank you.
Satya Kasimi, when the religion of Islam came to Kashmir, did they destroy the Buddhist and Hindu temples?
The change of religions has always in history led to the destruction of the previous houses of worship, and so that is the case in the Valley of Kashmir. Also, there was considerable destruction of Buddhist and Hindu temples, and that is why there is there is not so much of the art which survives of a very, very prolific uh, period of art which there was in ancient Kashmir. Thank you.
Shikha Misra, what materials did they use to preserve the colors?
Shikha, there's considerable detailed information available in the Chitra Sutra, the oldest known treatise on art making, about how colors are to be prepared. And this and other later and subsidiary texts have informed the art of painting and the use of its materials in the ancient and medieval period. So the main thing I would say is that all this was followed with a great deal of dedication and care, unlike the modern world where colors, paints, etc., are prepared so that they may be most economical in their preparation and therefore fetch the best profits for the companies producing them. Unlike that, we are talking about a period of time when dedication to quality was paramount. And therefore, you find whether it is these Kashmiri paintings, which we were looking at, which were about the 11th century, or you go even further back to the paintings of, for instance, Ajanta, which you find mainly of around the 5th century, 6th century. Even there, the colors survive. So it is an amazing development of technology, and it is a dedication to doing things very properly. Thank you.
Any Godan Namboodiripad, any attempt to revive this art? Like there is a movement in Kerala, especially after 1970.
Godan, I wish there were more focus upon this art than there is. There used to be, but perhaps in the last 40, 50 years, the world has not so much focused upon it. The fact is that this art is the basis of the Himalayan Buddhist art, and it is this art which is full of the essence of it, full of the beauty of it. As a matter of fact, it is these artists which were constantly sought by the rulers of Ladakh and Lahore Spiti and Kinnaur and Tibet. These artists were from places like Kashmir were constantly sought by them so as to get this art which transforms, this art which takes you away to this beautiful, uh, unparalleled place where you leave the cares of the world behind. So this art should be recognized much more. There should be many more books about it, and there should definitely be an understanding of how this art can contribute to the traditions of the art of the world. As a matter of fact, contemporary artists also need roots. They need bases of from which to draw their inspiration and their education in art. They need places where to train their souls in the beauty of art. They also need to lose themselves in the art. And I feel that the art of these 108 monasteries, which is the surviving work of the Kashmiri painters, needs to be highlighted much more before the world. Thank you.
Upendra Katte, are the manuscripts copy available now in India? I am referring to the knowledge which traveled to Tibet in China. Thank you for the wonderful presentation.
I believe there are considerable attempts to obtain copies and translations of the available manuscripts which have traveled out of India during the ancient period, because there was very considerable transport of these to other places. The institutions of His Holiness the Dalai Lama are also, I believe, contributing largely to this. And there would be a lot of value in this. The philosophy of life, the science of life, because at that time, whether we see what was happening in Kashmir or whether we see what was happening in Eastern India, there was a great development of logic. There was a great development of the understanding of what is knowledge itself. And there was a deep inquiry, and the steps of understanding were developed and looked at with a very keen vision. As a matter of fact, the earliest universities of the world were the Buddhist Mahaviharas, and places like Nalanda and Takshashila and Balkh, Vikramshila, Paharpur, interconnected monastic universities, and the development not only of knowledge but the development of the understanding of knowledge and how knowledge itself is to be understood uh, was so important in all this, and it should be looked at. Thank you.
John Palka, the Greek influence on the temples you showed at the beginning was striking. If I remember correctly, they dated to the 7th century CE, 1,000 years after the invasion of the Greeks. How did this influence survive for so long?
Yes, John. Actually, the influence of Greece and also the influence of Central Asia uh, was prevalent for a very long time in the Central Asian regions, and Kashmir was at a crossroads where it was on an artery of the Silk Route, which connected the lands of China with Europe. So there was constant movement. In fact, it's quite amazing to see that trade and movement and the travel of ideas continued and was so prevalent in ancient times. Sometimes I think it was probably more in ancient times than one expects. In fact, even more than sometimes you feel it happens today. Thank you.
Prerna Singh, where can we find the recording of this session if possible? Would it be available for public access?
Yes, Prerna, this in about in a few days from now, this should be available on YouTube on my channel, which is named after me, Benoy Behl. Thank you.
Godan Nambootripad, my understanding is that during the Cultural Revolution, they burned such manuscripts in China. Is this true?
I'm sure that such things would have happened, but I am not personally an expert on this. I know that during the Cultural Revolution, there was a lot of destruction. At the same time, I know that in various places, there were people who would have realized the value of such knowledge, and uh, a lot has also survived. Thank you.
That's a comment now from Prerna Singh saying, thank you for your kind response, sir. Looking forward to it. Would love to share it along in my circle. That seems to be about it. So I just announced that our next screening is going to be on 15th April. And this time we're traveling eastwards. We'll be talking about the history of Assam. It's a Saturday and it's at 6 o'clock. So please mark it on your calendars. We'd love to have all of you with us. Thank you for being with us.
My thanks again to the India Habitat Center and to Sushant, and it was such a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you.